Okay, we will call to order the Local Advisory Council meeting for June the 2nd. And this is an all remote meeting, no anchored location. However, there's live viewing for the public available through the UTA board meetings webpage and WebEx. I've asked Jana Osler if she would read the electronic board meeting determination.
Thank you, Chair. This is the electronic meeting determination statement. Consistent with the Utah Open and Public Meetings Act, as the chair of the Local Advisory Council of the Utah Transit Authority, I hereby make the following written determinations in support of my decision to hold electronic meetings of the UTA Local Advisory Council without a physical anchor location. Due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, conducting local advisory council meetings with an anchor location presents a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who may be present at the anchor location. Federal, state, and local health authorities continue to encourage institutions and individuals to limit in-person interactions. This written determination takes effect on June 2nd, 2021, and is effective until midnight on July 1st, 2021, and may be reissued by future written determinations as deemed appropriate. Dated this 12th day of May, 2021. Signed, Karen Cronin.
Thank you, Jana. Before we get started, I just wanted to note that Mayor Call is excused, as is Mayor Mendenhall. And Mayor Mendenhall has John Larson, who is joining us to listen in and take notes. So appreciate everybody making time for their schedule to attend this meeting, and understand that there's those. Okay, we're going to go to the next item on our agenda, which is the Safety First Minute, and we're going to ask Sheldon Shaw to lead us in this agenda item.
Good afternoon, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity. Good afternoon, council members. Today I chose to speak about our kids, and for some of us, our grandkids, who are now out of school and they're out riding their bikes and scooters, and they're on their way to and from the park. And so we as vehicle operators need to make sure that we're being extra cautious and looking for those pedestrians and bicyclists. And we should expect the unexpected. Kids oftentimes will cross the street in the wrong place and dart out where they probably shouldn't be. And so we need to slow down. If you're backing out of a parking place, your driveway, double check that there's no one around you before you do that. And maybe most importantly is not to be distracted. You need to have that reaction time. Chair, I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Point of order, Chair Cronin, I think you may be muted.
Yes, I was. Sorry about that. You'd think after all these Zoom meetings we'd have to stand up. I just thank Sheldon for helping us out with the Safety First minute. And also wanted to note that our next agenda item is public comment. We have had one that was received previously from George Chapman, which was distributed to the council members prior to the meeting. Jana, do you know if we have any other comment at this time?
We have two members of the public who have joined us. If they would like to make public comment, will you please use the hand icon to let us know that you'd like to make a comment? And I don't see any hands being raised, so I'm going to assume that they are here to observe. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And again, refer to the members to the comment that was received by George Chapman prior. We will go to the next item in our agenda, the consent item for the approval of the February 17th, 2021 Local Advisory Council meeting minutes and the March 24th, 2021 Local Advisory Council Transit-Oriented Development Work Session minutes. Take a motion at this time.
Ms. Chair, this is Clint Smith. I'll make a motion to approve.
All right, I have a motion.
This is Julie Fulmer. I'll second.
All right, I have a motion to approve those by Clint Smith with a second by Julie Fulmer. All in favor? Maybe say aye. So.
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, motion passes and those two items have been approved. We are going to go into the portion of our meeting where we invite the Board of Trustees to join us in consultation, and we invite Chair Christensen and the other trustees to join us at this time. Seems how I can't see everybody on my screen, hoping that everybody is.
We're here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carlton. Appreciate that. We're going to go to the next item on our agenda, which is the capital development update, and we're going to ask Mary De Loretto if she will lead us through this item. The 2021 legislative appropriations for UTA capital projects.
Good afternoon, Chair and Council members. Yes, we're going to give an update on the legislative appropriations that we got this past legislative session for our UTA capital projects. The legislature was very generous to us this year, and we really appreciate it. So I'm just going to go through the projects that have been funded through those appropriations. Can I have the next slide, please? So I'm going to tell you about HB 433, and then after I'm done, I'm going to talk about some changes that happened with House Bill 1008 during the special session, what changed a little bit of this funding, but not the total amounts, just the distribution. So there are one-time general funds of $101.6 million that will go into the TTIF for public transit projects. HB 433 allocated $100 million of that for double tracking strategic sections of the front runner commuter rail system, and that it also allocated $1.6 million for a rail station in the city of Vineyard. Then they also gave the authority for bonding for $232 million for public transit projects, and this included $200 million additional for double tracking strategic sections of front runner, and then $12 million for construction improvements to the S-Line streetcar facilities in Salt Lake, $11 million for bus rapid transit in the Mid-Valley area, $5 million for an environmental study at the point of the mountain, and then $4 million for UTA and Sharp-Tintic Railroad Consolidation project in Utah County. So what HB 1008 did was, instead of having $100 million for double tracking the one-time funds, they switched it. So right now the bonding of $232 million is totally for the front runner double tracking. So the $100 million for double tracking has now gone down to $68 million of the one-time apportionment. And then the $32 million will be for those other projects, the $12 million for S-Line, $11 million for BRT, $5 million for Point of the Mountain, and $4 million for Sharp-Tintic. So hopefully that makes sense. So those funds will now be available this year, those $32 million for those other projects and $68 million for commuter rail. Then the bonding authority of 232 will be totally for front runner. As we get ready to do the additional construction, we will go for those bonds. Any questions on that at all? Okay, then I'm going to talk about each of those projects that received funding on the next slides. So can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this is the front runner forward is for strategic improvements, double tracking improvements, vehicle technologies and safety improvements along the 90-mile front runner corridor to allow for enhanced speed, increased frequency and capacity, and then additional route reliability of the front runner service. The activities that we plan to do in 2021, we've already started the operations modeling and simulations to determine exactly which areas we should be doing the double track to get those improvements that we want. We've recently hired a program management team to help us with the strategic planning, the conceptual designs, cost estimates, and stakeholder engagement to keep that project moving forward. Once the operations modeling is complete, we'll begin conceptual engineering and environmental clearance on those sections that are critical right now to get going with. And then at the same time, we'll be developing a strategic business plan to help guide us forward for the long-term concepts along this corridor. Next slide, please. So this is additional $1.6 million has been allocated for the Frontrunner Vineyard station and double tracking associated with that. I think we presented this before, but the Vineyard Frontrunner station, we anticipate that opening in December. To open that station, we needed to add an additional 1.8 miles of double track to the corridor to allow for passing. And right now, we now have the contract is now signed. The groundbreaking was that this past May, and construction has begun. And the construction is for both the station and the double track. And as I mentioned, we anticipate that station opening in December of this year. So that we needed, once the design and costing was completed, we knew we needed an additional 1.6 million from the legislature for that new station. And so that was allocated, and we really appreciate everybody's help. Mayor Fulmer, I think, helped with that as well, getting those additional funds. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so this project, S-Line Streetcar Extension, it will extend our streetcar further into downtown Sugar House, into the heart of Sugar House, giving front door accesses to the businesses there and the surrounding amenities, including all the trails there, Parley's Trail, McClellan Trail. It's also Sugar House Park right there. You could access to the trail. So that $12 million will help us do that extension. And right now we are starting with looking at conceptual designs for where that station would most make sense. We don't want to preclude any future extensions to the north or south or even possibly the east. So it's going to be a lot of consideration going into where that station exactly is. We will start those designs this year. Well, immediately, actually, once we get this funding approved, and then we will start the community outreach activities on that effort. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, this is the Mid-Valley Connect. $11 million of state funds was allocated for this project. We've come to you just a few months back with the capital project plan for this project, what was approved. If you recall, it's a bus rapid transit. It's along that yellow corridor you see, which will connect our Murray Frontrunner and track station to the West Valley track station. It's a 7-mile line, which includes 15 stations with 1.4 miles of dedicated exclusive BRT lane. We are working with FTA. We have the project is now in what they call project development, so it's in line for small starts funding. We're redoing the environmental document. It's already been completed. We're just putting it into the federal format right now, and we don't anticipate any delays with that. And we are working with a memorandum of understanding with all the project partners to solidify funding. And this additional 11 million will really help pay the local portion of that. And we will be pursuing, I believe it's probably about a 60-40 federal funds on that project. We may pursue electric buses on that as well. It'll depend on how far the funding could go on that, but that's the plan right now. Next slide, please. Okay, the Point of the Mountain project, we received $5 million from the legislature for the environmental and design for that project. I'm not going to talk too much about this project because Patty Garber is going to be presenting the locally preferred alternative right after I'm done with this. But suffice it to say, it's a bus rapid transit project that will go from the Draper Frontrunner station down to the Lehigh station, and will be what we're calling state-of-the-art BRT project, or gold standard, I think we're calling it BRT project. We'll be refining the alternatives analysis and start conceptual engineering and environmental this year. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, I believe this is the last one. This is the Sharp-Tintic project, and this is a rail consolidation project that will, if you look at this larger picture here to the right, it shows UTA owns the Sharp line from the Provo station all the way down to the left side of that box where it leaves the box. That's approximately UTA's ownership of the Sharp. We also own a portion of the Tintic line, which starts at the top of the box where it says Tintic, and it goes all the way down to Payson. So we've known that if we ever want to get Front Runner down to Payson, we need a connection between that Sharp and the Tintic line. So we've been in favor of this connection, and Spanish Fork and Springville approached us and they would really like to eliminate that little stretch of Tintic line within the box, because that would remove 5 at-grade crossings, which are now what has grown into a residential area. So they would like to remove that. It would help future development in their area. And as I said, it would help extend UTA down to Payson in the future. We have put together a number of grants and local funds, about $6 million. We have identified a need for another $4 million for this project. And so we're thrilled that the legislature appropriated that additional $4 million that is needed to get this project completed. I think that was my last slide. Do I have any questions on any of these projects?
Any questions or discussion? All right, hearing none, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
We'll go to the next agenda item, 5B, which is the Point of the Mountain Transit Study, the locally preferred alternative. And we're going to ask Mary to help with that, along with Patty Garver.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Patty is actually the project manager on this, and she is going to present on this project. So thank you.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Madam Chair and other council members for having me today. As Mary mentioned, I'm going to tell you about the locally preferred alternative that has been selected for the Point of the Mountain Transit Study. I know that many of you have seen this presentation or a version of it numerous times, but we just want to make sure everyone understands why the alternative that we selected was, why our decision was made. And I know, seeing council members, that there may be some members that have not seen some version of this presentation. So moving on to the next slide. So why we did this project, we were looking at a high capacity transit connection between southern Salt Lake County and northern Utah County that would connect to existing and future development areas in the Point of the Mountain area. So we started in August of 2019. We started with 5 alternatives that came out of the Point of the Mountain Development Commission vision for the area. And then we whittled those down to, we started with bus and rail on both sides of I-15 between Sandy and Lehigh. And we whittled those down to 2 alternatives for our level 2 evaluation. And we made our selection the end of last year, and we're moving into environmental. Next slide, please. So I'm just going into a little more detail in this slide so you understand, in this presentation, so you understand why we made the final selection that we did. So in our level 2 evaluation, we looked at bus rapid transit, which we refer to as gold standard, as Mary mentioned, and I'll go into more detail on that later. So for our BRT that we looked at in level 2, as Mary explained, it starts on the north in Draper, it heads across the Point site. And for bus rapid transit, that allows us to have 2 stations at the Point in order to get up and over I-15, which with rail, as I'll show on the next slide, we're only able to have 1 station at that location. So we have elevated structures over Bangerter Highway and I-15 in this area. It enters the UTA right-of-way around 146 South on the east side of I-15, and then it travels down to Lehigh within the UTA right-of-way. Our original terminus on the southern end was at the Traverse Mountain Station, which is next to Adobe. And then we had several options of going 1 station south and then across west over to the Lehigh Front Runner Station. So for this option, it would have been 6 or 7 stations and about 8 miles. Next slide, please. So this is the rail option that we looked at in level 2, and we actually looked at 2 different technologies, diesel multiple units, which would be able to travel within our front runner corridor, but then on this new corridor. And then we also looked at light rail. So for both the gold standard bus and LRT, they would be almost entirely exclusive lane, and they would both have stations with amenities like train stations. And that, when I say that, like for the bus. One difference with the rail is that it would have to have its own satellite maintenance facility in the area, because our existing facilities would not be able to accommodate those vehicles. Moving to the next slide. So why did we end up choosing bus rapid transit? Well, bus rapid transit is approximately half the cost of rail. So we're looking at, for the bus rapid transit, around 500 million, whereas for rail, it would be close to $1 billion. Construction and operation, BRT is easier to construct and operate. Timing and implementation, it'd be much quicker to construct and begin operating bus rapid transit than rail. Next slide, please. So this figure shows the locally preferred alternative that we selected. So it has the similar alignment, or the same alignment shown in the other figures, starting at Draper Front Runner, across the point into the UTA right-of-way, and then down to Lehigh. However, for the preferred alternative, we included the South Triumph station across to the west of I-15, and there's an additional station at Ashton Boulevard, and then up to Lehigh Front Runner. So this preferred alternative includes 10 stations and is about 9 miles long. Next slide, please. So can you go back one slide? Sorry, I guess I took one slide out of this. So just to clarify on gold standard, it would include almost entirely exclusive lanes. So the bus would be in its own right-of-way, not conflicting with other traffic. Like I said, the stations would be similar to train stations. The vehicles look and feel like train vehicles. And it is the preferred alternative. Next slide, please. So this is just to show the process that we've been going through to approve and adopt the LPA. We went to Draper and Lehigh to give presentations, Pointing Mountain State Land Authority. We gave an update to the Board of Trustees, Mountain Land Association of Governments, and Wasatch Front Regional Council both approved the LPA. Last week, Lehigh City Council adopted the resolution, adopted the LPA through resolution, and then just yesterday, Draper adopted the LPA through resolution. And then looking to the future, we hope to have the environmental done within the next 2 years. And then when we near completion of the environmental, we'll do what's called the capital project plan, which will allow us to move forward and seek funding for the project. And then the MPOs will need to amend the long range plan, because right now they show rail. And then we'll come back to this body for final approval. And then the Board of Trustees will officially adopt the LPA. So some input to note from these different meetings that we've had. Both Draper and Lehigh asked us to consider an additional station to the south in Lehigh, going to 2100 North. And then Draper would like us to consider a pedestrian and bicycle trail on the elevated structure over I-15 at 146 South. And then one other consideration that came up recently is a third station near the point, which we've actually started looking at, and it could actually possibly be to the north of Bangerter Highway. But those are just some things that came out of these official adoption informational meetings that we had that we will be looking at in the next phase of our project. Next slide, please. So to look at some of the funding that we've received for the environmental and conceptual and preliminary engineering. Last year, the legislature gave us $750,000 for NT-TIF money for the environmental study. This year, as Mary mentioned, they appropriated $5 million for environmental and design. UTA in this year's budget has $500,000 for the project. And recently, the Wasatch Front Regional Council recommended $2 million in surface transportation block grant funding. And this is all for environmental and conceptual and preliminary engineering. Next slide, please. So moving into the next phase of our project, as I mentioned, we are moving into environmental. Mary also mentioned that we'll be refining the preferred alternative, looking at refinements to the design, such as the crossings at Bangor and I-15. And then we'll have full conceptual engineering of the alignment. And once the environmental review is completed in approximately 2 years, then we will move into identifying funding and completing design and moving into construction. Next slide, please. So that completes my presentation of the preferred alternative that we've selected for Corning to Mountain Transit. Any questions?
Sounds like you guys have done a very thorough job getting it to this point. Are there any questions or items for discussion on this agenda item?
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patty. We will go to the next item, which is item 6, the budget consultation. Consultation on Amendment 1 to the authority's 2021 budget. We're going to ask Bill Green and Mary to walk us through this agenda item.
Great. Good afternoon, Chair Cronin, council members. For the record, Bill Green, CFO with UTA. We're here today to consult with the council on a proposed 2021 capital budget amendment. I'll provide the background, and our Chief Service Development Officer, Mary DiLoretto, will provide the project detail. Excuse me. In accordance with Board of Trustee Policy 2.1, Financial Management, the Board of Trustees may amend or supplement the budget at any time after its adoption. Budget amendments which increase the overall capital budget or add a new project or increase the total operating budget are presented to the local advisory council for their consultation prior to final approval by the Board of Trustees. A proposed amendment to the authority's 2021 budget is being presented today for discussion. A board resolution is required for a budget amendment, and a resolution for the amendment will be presented to the board at a future board meeting after this consultation with the local advisory council. So we have for your discussion a proposed $7.35 million amendment. It includes 3 categories of requests. Number 1, increases to the project budgets, about $3.9 million, funding for 6 capital projects in the authority's approved 2021 budget. And Mary will detail these for you, but these additional funds would come from a combination of state funding appropriations, positive carry forward budget, and a higher than anticipated fund balance. The second category is additional budget authority of $750,000 for 2 new capital projects that have been funded through the state funding appropriations, the bills that Mary discussed earlier, and grant requests. And the third category is an acceleration of 2022 budget authority for the Box Elder Right-of-Way Preservation project budget. This project was identified in the 5-year plan. What we're asking and to discuss with you today, and getting the board's final approval on would be some acceleration of about $2.7 million from the 2022 period. So Mary, if there's no questions for me, Mary, would you like to go into the project detail?
Yes, can I have the next slide, please? Okay, thank you. So as Bill mentioned, we have 3 categories of project fund request here. The first 6, I believe, are ones that increase an existing capital project budget. So these are in the 2021 budget, and we're asking for additional funds for those. The first one is the Front Runner Forward project, which we discussed earlier. The state appropriated about 300 million between the one-time and the bonding for that project. And so we would like to accelerate the work on that project this year and add an additional 2.5 from that appropriation to this year's budget so we could get moving faster on that project. The second is the building remodel and reconfiguration budget. We have 100,000 in that budget. We've recently done an inventory of our break rooms and restrooms and locker rooms and storage areas, and we're starting with the ones that need the most work first. So this additional 365,000 would help us improve the restrooms and locker rooms in the Meadowbrook maintenance facility, as well as reconfigure some storage space for our filing that we need for our file storage area. The safety projects, we have 100,000 in our 2021 budget for safety. And the safety folks have done some inspections and identified a number of additional projects they would really like to get done this year. That includes fixing the flooring on the Jordan River Service Center parts room that buckled due to the earthquake last year. We also want to do some wiring insulation and sprinkler improvements, as well as power upgrades in Jordan River and Mid-Valley. And then installing a fall arrest system at Warm Springs to increase safety for mechanics that are working on the top of our trains. So those projects all totaled 77,000. Corridor fencing, we have a budget of 50,000. We'd like to add an additional 50,000 for that project. There's a long list of areas along our corridors where we'd like to improve safety and reduce trespassing by putting in fencing, and the safety department has identified 3 additional areas where weren't on this year's list, but they'd like to accelerate it based on operator concerns in those areas. So that's another 50,000 on fencing we'd like to add. On the non-revenue service vehicles, we would like to, that was a big budget this year, but we are way behind on that because we have under budgeted or not budgeted the non-revenue vehicle replacements in the past few years. And so we, based on the additional expansion projects that we've done and just also that we haven't replaced them in a timely manner, we would like to add additional 480,000 to that budget, and that will get us pretty much caught up so that our regular allocation in the 5-year plan would be sufficient to keep us ongoing on that vehicle replacement schedule. Then capital contingency, we started with a budget of 2 million this year, but we transferred through a technical budget amendment. We transferred about $429,000 to help pay for the Front Runner paint booth project. And so we are just asking to have that additional funds put back and maintain that $2 million capital contingency budget. So those are all the existing projects that we want to increase funds. Now the Box Elder Right-of-Way Preservation, that's funded through county revenue to purchase right-of-way for future expansion of Front Runner into Box Elder County. We had $1 million budgeted this year, and one of the things we want to do is buy the Utah-Idaho Central UIC Railroad Corridor from UDOT. UDOT is nearly complete with the process to surplus that corridor. They've done an appraisal, and that value is $2.7 million. So we do have that budgeted in next year's budget, but it's available now, and we would like to make that purchase now. So we're requesting that $2.7 million from the 2022 budget be accelerated into the 2021 budget so we can make that purchase. The other 2 projects are new projects that have not been in our budget for 2021. The S-Line extension, as we mentioned, the state appropriated $12 million for that. So we would like to put 600,000 of that 12 million into the new project budget this year so we could start the conceptual design and the public engagement efforts on that project. And then the 5600 West project, that is a project that we are doing in conjunction with UDOT's Mountain View Corridor project. That is basically the remedy for their mitigation for the Mountain View corridor efforts would be transit on 5600 West. We put in for a TTIF grant, and also we are going to put in for federal grants to fund that. So if we get those grants, we want budget in here to be able to start work on those projects. If we don't receive either of those grants, this is not going to be local funds. These will just be grant funded. So if we don't get those grants, this project will be pushed till next year. But if we get those grants, we want to have the authority for the $150,000 worth of work effort to start this year. I believe that's all of them. Are there any questions on any of those projects? Okay, thank you.
That's my understanding. This is just coming to us as information at this point, but will be brought back at a later point, or at least the amendment. Is that right?
Chair.
Bill, I'll let you answer that. That will go to the board, right, Bill, for their approval?
Yes, Chair Cronin, this is a consultation with the council, and then we'll be taking it with your approval. Then we'll be taking this to the board, hopefully later this month, for a board resolution and adoption.
Okay, so I guess I'm just wondering, we don't have an action item, so you just kind of want any thumbs up or any discussion or feedback is what you're looking for. Is that right?
Yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so turn that back to council members. Feedback that you would like to give on this consultation to Amendment 1.
Chair, this is Clint Smith. I just had a follow-up question on the Box Elder right-of-way preservation. So we had currently budgeted $1 million this year, and you said that 2.7 additional has come available earlier than anticipated, and that's why we're wanting to pull that in now. Is that correct? And where did that additional funding come from? I think I missed that.
So it's from a county tax, and there's actually about 7 million, I believe, maybe less now because we've been expending it, set aside in a separate fund from those taxes, from the second quarter sales tax in Box Elder County, to pay for the right-of-way preservation. So we have allocated in our 5-year plan how much we think we would spend each year. We did not anticipate buying the UIC corridor this year, so we had planned to spend it next year. So we're just moving it up from next year's allocation to this year. It's already been allocated and it's already sitting in a fund, so it's there now.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
Clint, and Beth knows this better than I, but when Box Elder authorized that tax, it's the sole use, really, or primary use for that tax. And so it had just accumulated a large balance until property was available to purchase for the right-of-way.
And just to dovetail, this is Beth Holbrook, just to dovetail what Chair Christensen just said, part of this is the corridor preservation piece, or the purchase piece for the corridor right-of-way, that there was some discussion as to who initially owned that, and UDOT was the owner. And so it's going through our process of, they are going to basically sell it to us as a result of all of this. But Carlton is correct, or Chair Christensen is correct. This is a second quarter sales tax that's dedicated to corridor preservation for rail specifically. And we've been doing that for the past couple of years. So thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that information.
Thanks, Clint. Any other discussion or questions?
Mary, this is Julie Fulmer. Maybe I missed it. Did this talk about ARP funds?
I'll let Bill answer that, but where those fund balances coming from? Bill, did you want to address that?
Sure, thank you. These are fund balances from the couple of places, from the carry forward from 2020, excuse me, and then also just fund balances as the sales taxes are coming a little bit higher than anticipated. So we have fund balances to pay for these. This is not part of the ARPA. Any fund balances that may be generated from stimulus would have come from the first tranche, which was CARES. And we have a discussion item a little bit later, I think in executive Ganat's presentation will cover the stimulus funding.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or items of discussion? All right, sounds like a lot of good things going on. Thank you for the update. We will move to item number 7, the transit-oriented development update, and we will ask Paul Drake and Jordan Swain to lead us through this item.
All right, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for your time. We are here to talk about some great things that are going on up in Ogden. We've actually seen a lot of attention and focus, particularly on our Ogden station and the property that UTA controls up there. As you're aware, that site was selected by the Board of Trustees in 2019, but because of some of the broader development opportunities that existed in the city saw around the Union Station, the old historic building, we felt that it was important to do some more detailed planning work and coordination efforts. So we're here today to present an addendum to the previously approved station area plan. And by state statute and UTA policy, this council reviews those plans and approves them. And as you'll see when we get into the presentation, it's not a wholesale replan, but rather a refinement of those previous planning efforts. We have some special guests with us as well. We have Brandon Cooper and Damon Burnham from Ogden City's Community and Economic Development. And we also have Jordan Swain, our project manager, TOD project manager. And before I turn the time over to them, I just want to say that through this whole process, Ogden City has been a great partner, and we do look forward to future collaboration with them as this project develops. So with that, I would like to turn some time over to Brandon and Damon to talk a little bit about Ogden City's involvement and their vision for this plan and addendum.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Chair and Council. It's wonderful to meet with all of you. As you know, we're busy here in Ogden. We are building a small BRT, just an insignificant project. Not at all. It's massive, and we're so excited about it. Our downtown is tore up in every direction possible, and it's very exciting. We've enjoyed the last little while dealing with Jordan and Paul on this amendment to this Ogden Station Area Plan. It's been wonderful to collaborate. We look to the Union Station as a campus, and what that means is that it encompasses the historic building, which is the old train depot station, but it also takes in land to the north and to the south, really making up a 35-acre area between 22nd Street and 27th Street along Wall Avenue. This is significant for us. It represents not only a large geographic area of our central business district, but it also highlights at its center one of our greatest cultural and heritage assets, which is the station itself and these museums that reside in it. So we're very bullish on the future development of this area, and we couldn't do that without including the UTA station and the adjacent land, vacant land just north of it. So we've set out to first look at the station area plan and to see what amendments are necessary there, and then after today's events, we would then embark on what will be a multi-month planning process, inclusive of UTA, Jordan and Paul specifically, and some other stakeholders that will allow us to plan out that 35-acre campus that I've just described in a manner that will be conducive to our overall downtown goals as it relates to our recently adopted Make Ogden Downtown Master Plan. So that's our vision. Again, we're all in at the station, so to speak, and we're very excited about the partnership we have with UTA currently and the future planning and implementation that we'll see at the station. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jordan for the specifics.
Thank you, Brandon and Paul. I just wanted to preface the slide deck by saying I'm gonna go through these slides relatively quickly to respect everyone's time here. But if we do touch on things that are of further interest or you feel like deserve more conversation, please stop. Feel free to stop me. I know I can be verbose and long-winded sometime, but stop me and we can talk about anything in this presentation that you feel like deserves more conversation. So with that being said, if we can go to the next slide. I just wanted to start by providing a bit of background here. As was said, in 2018, UTA initiated, it was actually a corridor study, kind of like the point of the mountain study that we talked about earlier here, but a study to look at the economics and connections along the BRT corridor in Ogden. And as part of that, we focused in on a few stations, including the frontrunner station, to produce what we would call a station area plan, right? A vision for that station. And the outcome of that was a fairly general plan. It didn't have a lot of detail to it, and it left a lot of assumptions in the air. A year after that, Ogden City in 2019 began their own planning process to look at the downtown of Ogden City, and got into greater detail and asked some other questions that were on the periphery of our station area. And so we thought that, after discussing this with Ogden and after seeing what development opportunities there were, we decided that it would be appropriate to re-examine our station area and perhaps make a few changes and also add additional details so that Ogden on board, the station area plan, was completely compatible with Make Ogden, which is the downtown Ogden plan. And so that's the main purpose of this amendment. So if we can go to the next slide. That's stated as the first premise here, right? That it's to reconcile the recommendations made in these two plans. But also we wanted to look at some major infrastructural improvements that could be made within the station area that we feel are very important to the future of the land uses and the overall development of this area. And also we wanted to provide more detail for UTA in the form of an implementation plan so that we knew exactly what steps to take in order to prepare the site for development, right? And to allow us to understand exactly what controls UTA has once the RFP is released and a development partner is selected. So those are the main premises of this amendment. So with that, if we can go to the next slide, please. So as you can see here, the overall vision of the station area plan encompasses property not only controlled by UTA, but actually stretches all the way down to the south of the Union Station campus. And we decided that was an appropriate planned boundary because of what has already been said. We wanted to make sure that the Make Ogden plan was completely compatible. So we expanded the plan area, but we also, with the help of our consultant, Design Workshop, we broke that large station area into sub areas so that we could make sense of what they mean to the overall vision. So the first of those areas is the Union Station campus, right? And as Brandon said very, very well, that really is the gateway into downtown Ogden. It's the gateway to 25th Street, which is certainly the economic center to Ogden. And so we want to understand exactly, as part of a TOD, what that means and what the actual Union Station building means within that vision. Moving up north of that, we've got the Transit Plaza, which we're calling that sub-area the Transit Plaza because that's really where the majority of the transit critical infrastructure occurs within the TOD, which as a TOD is an extremely important thing. And so within the Transit Plaza, we're looking at the bus loop, and in particular the BRT, any infrastructure that would be included with the BRT route that's being designed and constructed now, because we certainly do not want to interfere or disrupt that process. But then also around the transit critical infrastructure, we're looking at a high intensity of land uses, right? Typically within a TOD, we would want the highest intensity land uses adjacent to or as close as possible to transit critical infrastructure so that ridership is maximized within the 2D. Going north of that, it's being recommended that we look at some form of innovation district, right, which would also include some kind of dense mixture of residential, office, and what we're calling makerspace uses, right? So this would be a very intense area, very diverse area, and something that also would certainly facilitate a lot of ridership. And then to the north of that, the final sub area is this residential area, which we envision being a fairly high density residential area that builds up a critical mass and provides residents within the neighborhood who can make it a lively space 24 hours a day, not just during business hours. So that's the overall vision, and that's how with the consultant we've tried to tie all of these properties together to make it cohesive in one whole instead of just parsed out and individual. So with the overall vision being understood, if we can go to the next slide, please, we'll dive into some of the different aspects of this. The first of which is the circulation of the area. It's been recommended that we provide or we look at both active transportation connections and vehicular connections in a way that will tighten up or kind of decrease the size of the overall blocks within the neighborhood for the sake of improving walkability and access and so forth. And also what is being recommended is that we use active transportation, not just to improve access, but also to calm the traffic along Wall Street. Wall Street right now is kind of a barrier between our site and downtown. And so we're using these active transportation connections to sort of bridge that gap and to calm the traffic. And then certainly with the improved connectivity, we're also opening up additional opportunities for things like bus routing, microtransit, and other forms of public transportation. So with the circulation plan being discussed, if we can go to the next slide, please. So now we're going to hone in directly into or specifically to the parking and transit plan. What I really want to highlight here is that there is being some reconfiguration of transit critical infrastructure, but it is for the sake of opening up additional opportunities to develop within that block, and also additional opportunities for UTA to be more flexible with our routing, with bus routing and so forth, and also to make bus operations more efficient. Right now, it's a rather kind of a circuitous route for buses to get in and out of the bus loop and so forth. We're trying to make that more direct so that it improves the efficiency of operations. So those are, and then of course, we're going to be, as with most TODs, we're going to be consolidating the surface parking that currently exists into either one or two parking structures that will be directly adjacent to the other transit critical components. So we can go to the next slide, please. So to accomplish, I mean, this is a grand vision, and to accomplish any of this, there are some preliminary steps that we are going to have to make, again, in collaboration with Ogden to prepare the site for development. And the first phase of this really is to consolidate that parking that I just mentioned, right? We need to open up space for development without hindering or disrupting UTA's park and ride facility. So the way we envision doing that is to first build this parking structure. As you can see in the darkest color there in the map, it's kind of a brown. So building this parking structure so that we can still locate our patrons within a structure who would like to park and ride the front runner, or perhaps the BRT or other transit services. Phase two will be to build an additional parking facility that could be considered an overflow parking facility, but also begin to work on the first phases of the actual development, right? And in order to do that, we will have to reconfigure the bus loop as we depicted in the previous slide, and create that transit plaza. And all of this is leading up to phase four, which is the first full mixed-use commercial and residential development, which you can see in that orange color right there on the corner of 24th and Wall Street. So those are the four really kind of the first four basic phases that need to take place. But on the next slide, we'll get into some more specific tasks that are necessary for even the first phase of this to occur. And did I hear a question? Did someone say something? No, okay. So in this, we won't get into many of the specifics here, but I just wanted to share that we have identified a number of preparatory tasks that both UTA and Ogden City are going to take on in the next year to 18 months or so forth, in order to reach that first phase of development. And these things include things like environmental remediation, additional policy work. Ogden City is really progressively looking at some kind of a parking district that could include paid parking and so forth. Things like bonding. Anyway, so the message here is that UTA and Ogden City have identified many tasks which we will be working on in order to prepare this property for an RFP and for the first phase of development. So we're very excited to continue working with Ogden City. It's become a very strong relationship, and I think it will only strengthen over time. So we're thrilled to have completed the station area plan amendment, and we're even more excited to take the next steps to prepare the property for development. And I believe that's the final slide.
Right. Thank you, Jordan. And I neglected to mention those two plans that are kind of the precursors to this addendum. The Ogden on Board and Make Ogden were done with some of our great partners. Ogden on Board was funded substantially by Federal Transit Administration, and then Make Ogden was jointly funded with the WFRC's TLC program. And so just a shout out to our partners there. Are there any questions for us from what has been presented today?
I'll open that up to the council members and the trustees. Any comments, questions?
A question, Chair. This is Troy Walker. Paul, would you kind of go over the percentage breakdown of how this will work from UTA's perspective in the partnership, just so everyone's aware?
What do you mean the percentage breakdown there?
Aren't we partnering with the developers like we've done in the past with this?
Yeah, that is correct. So I'm not sure about the exact numbers that you're getting at, but certainly on UTA's portion, our contribution would be limited to the land that UTA controls adjacent to our station. What we generally do, as you're aware, Mayor, is a joint venture with private developers. We would work with them through due diligence, entitlement, permitting, and then have an agreement between us and them where UTA would contribute our land, or it could go in the form of a ground lease. Obviously, this is fairly preliminary, so we don't know what the deal structure would be just yet. But anyway, that would be our contribution, and then the actual numbers would be negotiated with our private developer through that process. I'm sorry.
A similar relationship like we've done in Sandy or around. That's where you're headed.
Certainly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Paul, it's fair to say that we haven't gone through the request for proposal process yet, because the plan will basically be the part of that process, right?
That's correct. We felt that this addendum was necessary to get us prepared for a request for proposals from the development community. And so certainly this is a great step that's going to push us in that direction. We anticipate to do that soon. But yeah, this is the preliminary step.
Mayor Hale, does the north end, the residential area there, take in the real estate that had a Walmart on it?
It does not extend that far north, no.
Right.
Jordan, what's there now where the residential is proposed? Is it just older housing or is it blank land?
Yeah, it is currently being used for single family residential housing. I think I would say the economic strength of that neighborhood is perhaps distressed in nature. So it was felt like this could be entered into the plan as a way to envision how to repurpose or redevelop that property to strengthen the overall economy of Ogden. But certainly, UTA does not control that property, and so it would have no control over what actually occurs there.
Maybe Brandon could jump in. You still there, Brandon?
Yes.
Do you mind talking a little bit about Ogden's vision for that particular area?
I think Jordan classified it very well. It is an economically distressed area. There are some single-family homes, but there are a number of low-level or entry-level commercial buildings. So old, under-maintained commercial buildings in that area, and so it's kind of ripe for redevelopment. And you've said accurately that it is owned by a number of third-party owners. It was a site of a Walmart at one point in time, but that Walmart has since moved to a location just a couple of blocks to the north. But when that concept was originally conceived, probably 10 years ago or so, this was the original site for that Walmart.
Brandon, could I comment a little bit, and you can correct me if I'm wrong or if I didn't get this right, but some of the things that Ogden City is also looking at doing is they're obviously re-envisioning their entire downtown, and for those who haven't been there in a while, there are some pockets of amazing opportunities that are still available in terms of how they're looking at that. And their thought process, in addition to that, is also they have been applying to get a road funding, transportation funding for 24th Street. And as you know, 24th Street comes over the train tracks from I-15 and heads north into the city. And that piece of it, that continued connectivity, I think is only going to be more valuable for Ogden as they continue to grow and develop. They want to also increase their connectivity to a lot of the job creation that's going on just immediately south, which is around the Hill Air Force Base area. And those elements, I think, are all connecting with how Ogden is envisioning what it can do in the future, and looking at this as a real opportunity to establish that vision that the city and the mayor and council have. I think that there's great opportunities to take a look at this, because there's something that if they're going to be doing this is the opportunity to say, we want to do this to the best ability that we can, and what would this look like? And I think that they've come up with a couple of options that are pretty impressive.
Thank you, Trustee. Any other questions for us or Ogden City? Okay, thank you for your time.
Any other questions? Thank you both to Paul. Appreciate Jordan and everybody's in this discussion.
Thank you much.
We need a motion to be able to help them move forward. So I would entertain a motion at this point.
Madam Chair, Troy Walker, I move that we approve the amendment to the TOD proposal.
This is Julie Fulmer. I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion to approve by Mayor Walker with a second by Mayor Fulmer. Any further discussion? If not, I'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, that motion passes. Thank you again so much for all the work going in.
Thank you.
We will move to agenda item number 8, our service update and the August 2021 change day. And I think that Nicole Bordeaux is going to help us with that, along with Eric Colliston and Ryan Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for allowing us to be here. I'm Nicole Bordeaux. I am the Planning and Engagement Chief here at UTA. I am here today to present an overview of our recommended major service changes for August Change Day, again with Eric Callison, our Manager of Service Planning, and then Ryan Taylor, our General Manager for Special Services. Thank you. Next slide, please. So today we're recommending, we're doing an overview on our recommended changes on microtransit as our permanent service for August Change Day. I'm going to give a brief update on the pilot that you're all aware that we've been doing since November 2019. It launched back in 2019. It demonstrated a great service, and today we're here just giving you a brief update about it. Microtransit provided a great accessible service. It was high usage for our wheelchair accessible vehicles. It was a great affordable service. It was convenient for our customers at $2.50. What we saw was it was great for shared rides. We saw previously with before the pandemic that was nearly 30% of all trips were shared rides, which was great for us. It was also proven to be a great first and last mile solution, with over 50% of our rides being trips that connected to transit. We also were essentially having a virtual bus stop at every corner in our service area. That was the area that was like 65 miles in that South Salt Lake County area. We were on track to meet all of our pilot goals prior to the pandemic, and that includes our operational cost, ridership, customer experience, and stakeholder support. Also with microtransit in general, we were consistently engaging with our customers and our stakeholders. We did 3 customer surveys out to the public through either our VIA app or our customer service app through UTA Open, UTA, which was on our website. And then we also, many of you saw us at City Council meetings. Trustee Christensen was out there, or Jaron Robertson was out there meeting with you, and then we tried to meet with elected officials. So today, like we said, we're recommending that we make this permanent. We've been doing our public input through April through May. And then next slide, please. I'm going to turn the time over to Ryan to talk about how this kind of trickles down through our system. Ryan?
Great, thanks, Nicole. With this recommendation that we make microtransit a permanent mode, we currently have 4 flex routes in the microtransit zone. Just as a primer on the flex routes, they are like a fixed route, but they can deviate off course to pick up somebody in a mobility device, and they typically serve areas where a regular 40-foot bus can't serve, so lower ridership areas. So what we are proposing is that we convert 3 of our fixed bus routes into flex routes that have been lower performing, and that we redistribute all of the miles and hours that we put into the microtransit zone with our flex routes and distribute those in other areas throughout the county. This will allow us to improve and expand service and coverage in other parts of Salt Lake County. So it's really taking those resources, redistributing them, and widening our impact and availability of transit throughout the valley. And so with that, I'm going to turn over to Eric Callison to go over the specific changes that we're recommending. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Ryan. So just a quick overview of the changes. We have these first few routes on the list, flex routes F504, F518, F534, F546, and F547 are the flex routes that operate within the microtransit pilot area currently. We propose that those will be replaced with that microtransit service. In addition, there's a fixed route in the area, Route 526, that operates completely within that area that we propose replacing with microtransit. Route F514 also runs in the microtransit pilot area, but we do expect the ridership on that route to rebound strongly when people return to work. So we're proposing to improve that service from the current 60-minute service to 30-minute service in August. We also have these 3 fixed routes that Ryan mentioned just a moment ago. That's routes 11, 232, and 525 in Salt Lake County. We propose replacing those with flex routes. In the case of the 11 and 232, it's a more direct conversion, but in the case of Route 525, we would split that into 2 flex routes, routes F202 and F525. And we have an illustration of what those look like here in a minute. If we can go to the next slide, please. We also have a couple of additional changes. Routes F556 and F578 are 2 other flex routes in Salt Lake County. We propose changing the alignment on those routes in order to extend them a little bit further south and west in Salt Lake County and provide some additional coverage. And then Route 871 is a connection currently between the Draper Town Center Station on the blue line of tracks and Lehigh Frontrunner Station. That's a fixed route bus. It's currently running at 30-minute headways, but we are not seeing the demand for that route at the moment. So we'd like to back that off to 30-minute peak and 60-minute off-peak service to match the Frontrunner trains at Lehigh Station. Next slide, please. With the flex routes being discontinued in the microtransit pilot area, we do propose to expand the microtransit area slightly. That's because the flex routes do have a deviation zone, as Ryan mentioned, within which they can deviate to pick up additional passengers. And there's just a couple of areas, these areas that are shown in light orange, would be added to the microtransit area in order to make sure that those people are still covered. Next slide, please. So here's a couple of illustrations on this slide and the next couple. These are the routes that are affected. The black dashed lines are where the routes would be replaced, and the purple lines show the new flex routes. So you can see Route 11 in the avenues would be replaced with Route F11 that would serve the portion of the avenues that is not covered by Route 6. We'll focus more on that portion of the upper avenues. And then on the west side of the valley, you can see Route F556 would be extended below the dotted line portion, which is 6200 south down to 7800 south. Route F578 would likewise be extended over to 5600 west to provide a transfer point there, and that's some additional coverage in that region of West Jordan. 3200 west would be converted from a fixed route to a flex route, going from 60-minute service to 30-minute service. And you can see just to the right of where it's labeled West Jordan on the map is where routes F202 and F525 would serve to replace the existing Route 525, which is currently just a small loop at the northern end of that. By splitting that up into 2 flex routes, we provide a number of additional rail connections, just some additional connective tissue to that kind of west side I-15 corridor, where there's a number of light industrial and other uses. And then down at the bottom, between Riverton and Draper, you can see just one more additional extension. That's a Route F514, go a little bit further south and east to cover some offices and apartment buildings that are southeast of the Draper Frontrunner Station. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit more detailed. You can see Route F11 in the avenues, Route F232 on 3200 west in West Valley City, Taylorsville, and West Jordan, and then routes F202 and 525 in Midvale and Sandy. Next slide, please. And this is also the Route F514 extension. Currently, it just comes down to 123rd South and goes straight into the Frontrunner Station. We would be extending that a little bit further south, as I mentioned, south and east of the station. And then you can also see in the last image the extension of the 556 and 578 to meet at 5600 West, 7800 South. And I believe that's the last slide with maps on it. So let's go ahead to the next slide. The impact of this is pretty small. Basically, the microtransit service would continue to operate as it has. There's no budget impact there. We do have with the Flex Impact, we have the new Flex route service that we're proposing. But between the discontinued Flex routes in the pilot area and the fixed routes that would be replaced by Flex routes, the delta is about 112,000 annual cost to UTA. And we expect that that will largely be absorbed by capacity that Special Services currently has. Due to the operating situation in the pandemic, we don't need to hire any additional people for that. And so that will be a pretty smooth change as far as that goes. Next slide, please. And then I don't know, Nicole, if you want to talk more about this, but basically we had a public comment period from April 28th to May 28th. And we are currently in the process of receiving that feedback, and we'll be presenting to the Board of Trustees on June 23rd about the public comment that we received, as well as any additional changes that have come from that.
Yeah, I think that's great, Eric. I think to finish up also, this is the major changes that we do for August. We'll also be back to the board to get the final approval on Title VI and move forward with our recommendation after the 23rd, and then again in August for our final August change day approval. So I think that's our presentation today.
Thank you so much, Nicole, Eric, and Ryan. Are there any questions or comments from the trustees?
Mayor Hale, Midvale. I'm concerned that the senior centers on Holden and Center and the new development going in the Jordan Bluffs area, is there a way to bring one of those lines across there so that it can feed both of those areas?
So we have been discussing a couple of modifications based on feedback that we've received to Route F202, which goes down 700 West. Currently, the 525 goes down a combination of 700 West and Sandy Parkway through there. And we're talking about potential adjustments to that route. We also have proposed connecting that into Bingham Junction Station, which is not marked on this map. But that would provide some additional coverage on that street.
Yes,
You're on mute, Mayor Hill. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what?
There you go. We'll take,
There's just a lot of growth going on in that area. And if we miss the initiative, they'll start driving their cars in there. And I'd like to have a bus route to anticipate that growth. Plus, as I mentioned, there are 2 senior centers and the county senior center that it's on Main Street. And I'm not sure how you would service Main Street, but I want you to remember those because they need that extra opportunity for transit in that area, or they will very soon.
So what I used to do in the before times, I would print out Google Maps just on a piece of paper, black and white, and hand them out to attendees when I was presenting for service changes. I don't know if it would make sense, Mayor, if you'd like to send us just a map with some X's on it. You know, what are the locations that you're concerned about? We can make sure that we consider those. You know, like I said in the past, I would have just handed you a piece of paper and a Sharpie, said here, draw some X's. But if you could send that to the board office, I'd be happy to make sure that that gets considered.
We'll do that. Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Any other comments or questions?
No, I was just going to say, Madam Chair, it's Trustee Christensen. I was just going to say last night, Riverton City Mayor and Council invited me out prior to their meeting. We actually went out and tested the not new, but the microtransit service, and because they did have some questions about that. I would say for the most part, most of the folks were satisfied with this transition. There's one concern about some service and some change, and so our folks are looking at it, but I thought it was a productive discussion and good feedback opportunity.
Great, thank you for sharing that with us. And any other discussion or comments before we move forward? All right, the next agenda item is a discussion item with Eddie Cummings leading it and Fred Ross and Tal Ehlers over the 2021 safety and security presentation. So we will let Eddie take that lead.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. My name is Eddie Cummins. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at UTA. Joining me today is Fred Ross, who's UTA's Chief of Police, and Tal Ehlers, who is UTA's Emergency Management Program Manager. Together, we will be presenting the 2021 Safety and Security presentation. Could we go to the next slide, please? Today's presentation will highlight UTA's Police Department staffing, the 2019-2020 statistics. We'll talk a little bit about local coordination and key events. And then, of course, we'll talk about emergency management, incidents, and activities. We go to the next slide, please. And with that, I will turn it over to UTA's Chief of Police, Fred Ross, who will begin the presentation. Chief?
Thank you, Mr. Cummings, and Madam Chair and Board, thank you for your time this afternoon. Our current staffing is 84.5 FTEs, including myself, our office staff, detectives, a sergeant, 6 detectives, 3 fare inspectors that focus strictly on fare enforcement, no policing, 2 captains, 4 lieutenants, 10 sergeants, and 54 officers in the field, including the lieutenants and captains. To take note, Salt Lake County, 8 sergeants and 42, that's how they're broken down. Utah and Tooele County, 1 sergeant, 8 officers. And Davis, Weber, and Box Elder, 1 sergeant and 4 officers. Next slide, please. Just a quick overcap of the 2019-2020 person and property crimes. Salt Lake County in 2019 had 191 persons crimes, property crimes 2336, societal crimes 1940, and other crimes 1147. Just as a point of clarification, societal crimes are drugs, public intoxication, and the other crimes are primarily warrant service. In Utah and Tooele County in 2019, we had 7 property crimes, 131 societal crimes, 111, person crimes, 7, property crimes, 131, societal crimes, 111, and other crimes, 73. In 2020, 11 person, 115 property, 73 societal, and others are at 59. In 19, in Davis, Weaver, and Box Elder, 18 person, 371 property, societal 289, and other crimes 252. In 2020, 13 persons, property 270, societal 282, and other crimes 149. While we did have the pandemic in 2020, we did see a lot of increase, particularly in nuisance type issues. Those did rise for us across the board. Next slide. Myself and the 2 captains and lieutenants, we and all 4 lieutenants collaborate monthly with all the jurisdictions that we interact with, which is a great number. I participate in the Salt Lake County's VPA meeting monthly, in addition to the Leads meeting, which is the Salt Lake Law Enforcement Administrators and Directors meeting. There's a Chiefs meeting in Utah County, as well as meetings in Davis and Weber counties that we participate in. And all, of course, they're from time to time based on intel and what's going on within along the Wasatch Front. A lot of Zoom meetings this last year, sharing intelligence and other items of importance. So we do collaborate very heavily as we intersect with so many other jurisdictions. Next slide, please. Some of the key events last year, we all know what 2020 and the summer of 2020 brought us. Early on in this, we found there was a major communication gap in getting information out, particularly in the Salt Lake County area from Salt Lake City. And so with the help of Tal and a couple of our tech experts, we were able to provide a software called Code Red, which is a notification software that Salt Lake City utilized primarily, but got all the information out to all the chiefs and all the departments, not only in Salt Lake County, but the adjoining counties as well. And enabled us to get real time information and intelligence during some of those protests and marches, as we never knew where they were going to end up from city to city or even county to county. So in Utah County, with the UVX line, is it progresses through two major cities and along that main business corridor. Our officers have spent a great deal of time interacting with all the businesses, aligning that simply so they know who to call. If there's an issue related to a transit issue or problem, they shouldn't be calling the local police department. That's just an additional burden. They should be calling us, and they've all been educated on that. And we want to establish a very strong relationship with those businesses, and also collaborate when the system first went in down there, collaborating with the local municipalities simply on some of the issues that they saw. We had some left turn issues that working with Orem and Provo, we were able to take care of those, reduce the accidents, and make it safer for everybody. In Davis and Weber County, one of the big ones, we work directly with local and federal agencies to identify, track, and apprehend a known terrorist. Believe it or not, did reside in Salt Lake County and was traveling up to our adjoining counties to the north to work every day. We had a multi-agency training operation in Layton City last year. It went phenomenal. It was a big deal. If anybody had the opportunity to participate or witness that, it went very well. Also, we have four bomb dogs that get utilized not only in Weber and Davis, but all throughout our system by our partner agencies. Is they don't always have them on, and we do have one on at all times. Next slide. I'll turn it over to our emergency manager, Tal Ehlers, and then we'll take some questions at the end.
Thank you, Chief. And for the year 2020, the involvement with emergency management it really was unprecedented. I know that worked quite a bit over the last year or so, but for the state of Utah, it was one for the record books. We had multiple incidents here that affected the Utah Transit Authority. Some of them I have listed. The COVID-19 response, which was an ongoing response for at least 15 months from 2020 and then on into 2021. The earthquake response, where our Emergency Operations Center was also activated with our EOC staff, which integrates many of the UTA personnel into a team here at our Emergency Operations Center so that we can go ahead and support the needs of on-scene incident management. We had statewide protests, marches. We also had a high winds incident back in September, as well as the vice presidential debate where we worked with the University of Utah, Salt Lake City, and the Secret Service in helping to facilitate the needs of the politicians attending that event. Lower level activations that we had during the year, of course, the ongoing COVID-19 response, also issues in the news with law enforcement and district attorney and briefings to the press and the public. And also, of course, we were activated for the 2020 presidential election. Next slide, please. Also, in this last year, the Emergency Management Office for UTA continues to participate with the State of Utah Division of Emergency Management with its state emergency response team. And we participate with drills. We participate with many of our partners, including UDOT and other emergency support function participants, to make certain that we are a part of the integral state team for emergency response. Also, this last year, many of our emergency plans were updated for the authority, including the emergency operations plan, the emergency preparedness plan, and the continuity of operations plans. These plans are living documents. They continue to be adjusted. They continue to change and grow as new information comes in. And this office stays on top of those particular plans so that we have the best information available to our personnel. Also, as far as exercises had gone for 2020, due to the coronavirus, our exercises were changed at the federal, state, and local level. Typically, we get together with many of our regional partners, our local partners, all along the Wasatch Front, with whom we work together and we participate together in these exercises. All in-person exercises were canceled for a period of time. I'm pleased to say that now, as we are getting into 2021, 2022, we have returned to planning with different jurisdictions and agencies and departments for in-person trainings. And one other thing that I would bring up is that in relation to the FRA and our compliance with them, to make certain that we did remain in compliance, even during COVID, we did hold on 2 separate occasions full-scale exercises with our commuter rail teams along with our law enforcement. And we conducted those exercises. We remained in compliance even through the pandemic. So it was really terrific to be able to continue to do that as we continued our service to our passengers and as we continued to function as an entity throughout the pandemic. That concludes what I have. Are there any questions directly related to emergency management that I can answer?
We'll open that up to the council members and the trustees. Any questions? Sounds like you covered everything great. Thank you so much. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, we will go on to agenda item B, which is where we have an open dialogue with the Board of Trustees about information that just kind of an exchange of information. And as we started to that, I just wanted to make note that based on the request of some of the local advisory council members back in our meeting in February to address trustee compensation going forward, I'm working with Mike Bell, UTA legal counsel, to draft a resolution that we will bring forward to the local advisory council members. We're looking sometime the end of June for that, and then you can take that to your individual stakeholders, and then we will address it in our next meeting in February. So any other things from the trustees or the local advisory council members you want to bring up to discuss at this point in our meeting?
Madam Chair, did you mean your next meeting in September, or did you said February, but
Oh, September. I thought I said the February is when somebody brought it up.
It's up to you, but I just wanted to make sure that was
No, February was when it was brought up. We're working to draft it, and then we'll bring it in September.
Great. Sorry.
Thanks for correcting me if I said that. I'm so sorry.
This is Clint Smith, and I don't know if the trustees are planning on addressing this at a later time, but obviously I think it'd be a great time to just get an update. Obviously, we've had Carolyn, our executive director, leave us and understand her reason for doing so, but obviously just an update on the plan moving forward as far as now what your vision is and anticipated timeline of finding a replacement for Carolyn. I think we're obviously headed in a good course, and we have great people in place to make sure we stay the course, but certainly we have a position that I'm sure everyone will be looking forward to having filled again as well. So if we can get an update.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And if it's okay with you, Madam Chair, I'll give my pitch, and then my colleagues may want to chime in as well.
Perfect. This is a perfect time.
Yeah, and we recognize, that Carolyn has a great opportunity for her. She also has a great challenge, I think, as she heads off, and our condolences certainly go to the agency she's going to. That last week was horribly tragic, and I don't think any of us hasn't fallen on deaf ears that could have been us, and we hope it never is. We are in the process this week of going through a procurement process to hire a recruiter and or to select a recruiter to help us in the selection process. We obviously want to be thoughtful in that selection process and have it be open. So I don't know that I have a preset determination on timeline. I think Carolyn is looking to the first part of July, and so we would most likely need to, in the not too distant future, name an interim director to cover during that transition period with that, and so it's an important decision for us. I will echo though that we have a very strong executive team, and one that I think knows where we want to go, and also I think working in cooperation with us as Board of Trustees, be able to keep things moving. But we're anxious to fill the position, and as soon as we can find the appropriate person, would want to make that change as soon as we can. But I would anticipate us having an interim director during the process. I don't know if Jeff or Beth, if there's anything else you wanted to add to that.
I think you pretty well covered it, Carlton, and I know we're united in looking out for the best interests of this agency, and we've had discussions, and I think sad is the right word to see Carolyn go with all the opportunities that are going forward for UTA with the support and trust of the legislature and our local leaders. We want to be true to that support, and we wish Carolyn well, and we will miss her. There's no question about that, but what a wonderful opportunity for her, and we once again want to be supportive of her. You know, transit organizations across the board are supportive of each other because we're all in the same effort to provide service to our citizens. So thank you.
I could not have said it better than my colleagues already did. I agree completely.
Thanks, Carlton. I appreciate that. Did the agency use a recruiter last time around? Obviously, filling that position when we found Carolyn, and I guess what do we feel like we learned from that process last time that we may do differently this time?
That's a good question. The short answer is we definitely used a recruiter last time, and that was very helpful. It brought in some great candidates, including Carolyn. I think it gave us a good perspective. We're in a slightly different position than we were, 2.5 years ago, or 2.5 years ago. And I don't know that we've identified yet as a board, exactly what we're looking for in this. But we still need somebody with a strong background in transit, somebody who has a strong understanding of the capital development process, and is capable to also move their executive team forward. We have 2,700 employees, and you can't look past the day-to-day needs and the operations. So that somebody with strong operation skills would be an important aspect as well. We're I think going forward in a good position where we have a strong service base, and we're optimistic that will come back in the next couple of years. But we also, I think, as Mary outlined, we have some great capital opportunities and more that are needed. I think we can point to a lot of places in our service area where there's high growth and almost and a strong need for some transit component to it in the development process. And so I think, we want somebody that can, help us look down the road and make sure we formulate those needs.
Do we need a recruiter? I mean, can you just post this? I mean, someone snagged Carolyn. Can you go out and snag someone else? Do you need to go through this recruiter process? I guess is my question. Or couldn't we just post this? I mean, you know what you want. You know the kind of person you want. You just don't feel like you have the capacity to do the HR, or what's the situation there?
I don't think we have a good people office, Mayor. I would say that sometimes the person isn't necessarily looking, and the recruiter is good at teasing them into thinking about the position, and that solution could be local. That solution might be from somewhere else, and I think you want to poke both of them a little bit, and sometimes the recruiter can tease them out a little better than just an open. I'm sure we'll get folks that will apply from an open posting, but we still feel like we need somebody to maybe tease out a few candidates as well. But we think that process can be fairly quick. I don't think we have to drag it out.
And I think a recruiter can help to fine tune that, if you will, to look for that skill set that we ultimately decide upon. And I think that ultimately is where the value lies in obtaining a recruiter.
Having just gone through a very similar process here in Harriman as we had to fill our city manager role, obviously there's going to be a cost associated with identifying a firm to go out and do that recruitment for us. Is that probably then would come forward back, at least to be presented to this body and others, as far as a budget amendment to cover that cost?
We would be able to do it within our existing approved budgets. It's not, it's not inexpensive, but it's not out of the realm of our already approved budgets.
Okay.
And there will be some, there will be some cost savings, during the transition as well. So I think bottom line, it won't be, burdensome in that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Appreciate the information.
Good questions and a good discussion there. And again, so grateful for Carolyn and how she's helped the agency over the last couple of years, and wish her the best as she goes forward in her chosen path. Any other questions back and forth between the trustees and the council members?
I guess I have all the questions that today, so I'll ask another one. Carlton, just, we've talked about some of our service numbers and those types of things, and I'm very pleased with, taking our microtransit project from pilot to a full service for us. But that being said, obviously we're still really coming out of the effects of a long year of COVID, and just trying to get used to seeing people's faces without masks again. And hopefully this body's able to meet in person again very soon. But that being said, with the recent, I guess, kind of de-escalation of some of those parameters that have been put in place on us, as the trustees, are you starting to see those ridership numbers increase just in the last, couple of months as we've started to see the light at the end of the tunnel for the pandemic?
Yeah, and I think Carolyn and Eddie Cummins are planning to report on that ridership here in just a second, but it definitely is improving. And if it's a lagoon day for a high school, it's a definite plus. The platforms are chocked full of high school students using FrontRunner. It was actually a reassuring view for us.
Yeah, just to follow up with that, where I take FrontRunner and to and from work over the last 2 months, there's been a noticeable difference. I mean, there'd be times before I would get on there and you could pretty much choose your seat, or, you know, maybe a section of 4, there'd be one person there. In the last several weeks, there have been times when you pretty much were, I don't want to say packed into the car, but most of the seats were taken, which was a welcome thing to see. And then to Carlton's point, yeah, you had the high schools that had Lagoon Days, and yeah, it was standing room only on those days. So yeah, we're hopeful that it's coming back and sooner than later.
Oh, thank you. I know most of the high schools out in the Harriman area's graduation is tomorrow. So warn your front runner people that they'll be busy because they are all heading to Lagoon.
Nice to have those options available to us again this year. And I think that's a great segue to go into our next agenda item, the reports and other business. We're going to ask Carolyn to give us an agency report, and then Eddie to give us a ridership report, and then Bill Green to talk to us about stimulus funding.
Great. Thank you and good afternoon. Yes, I actually do want to share some, just my appreciation to the local advisory council for your support during my time here at Utah Transit Authority. It's been an exciting time. It's much of it in the pandemic, but I think we were able to accomplish a lot. And, you know, with the, you know, coming in with a fairly new board structure and being able to sort of organize how we grow and how we move forward our capital development while still enhancing our bus services was something that I really tried to focus on along with the employees. So it's really helped. As you know, I'm going to Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, which is the agency that just had the mass shooting last week. And so been talking to their chair and their vice chair or their past chair about just the need to come in and bring really lift morale up there and work through sort of what will be quite a bit of a healing process for that agency. So I'll definitely have a lot of work to do, but not something that was planned to be on my plate, but you know, something that I think I will be able to do as they also come out of the pandemic and try to bring back their ridership as well. So anyways, they have a lot of discussions there. I was there 23 years before, so I understand the agency, but it's not the same agency I left 2 years ago. So it'll be something that I've got a lot of work to do there when I get in there. So I really appreciate it, all the support this council has given me. So thank you. Today I just have the two things. One is the ridership report, show where ridership is going. The second thing is Bill Green, CFO, will actually talk a little bit. I think there was a question earlier about the stimulus money and just how we're spending down the stimulus funds, and so or just what our anticipated expectation is on that spend down. So I'm going to turn it over to Eddie Cummins, our Chief Operating Officer, right now.
Good afternoon again. This is a short ridership report for January through April 2021. Next slide, please. This chart compares ridership, our current ridership, to pre-COVID. As you can see, we saw a sharp decrease in ridership in March of 2020. And although our ridership is still down significantly, we are trending in the right direction. When comparing current ridership to that of pre-COVID, microtransit is down 33%, our paratransit is down 39%, fixed route bus is down 41%, UVX is down 43%, Trax is down 56%, and FrontRunner had the most significant decrease, and it's down 70%. Next slide, please. This chart compares January through April ridership from 2019, 2020, and 2021. When comparing to 2019, 2020 ridership was down 23%, and 2021 is down almost 54%. Next slide, please. This chart compares year-to-date ridership against the previous year. The pink bar is 2020 and the red bar is 2021. Although we're currently well below 2020 ridership, we expect to make up some significant ground in the coming months. Just as a reminder, January, February, and part of March 2020 were pre-COVID. So as we go along, we'll start to be comparing COVID ridership to COVID ridership, we'll start to see a significant increase, and I think we'll catch up quickly. Next slide, please. This chart shows historical average weekday ridership. This chart goes from January 2008 through April 2021. The blue line is average weekday ridership. The green line is the 12-month moving average, and the red line is the 60-month moving average. This chart is very telling. You can easily see the impact the pandemic had on our ridership. On a positive note, the average weekday ridership number is currently trending in the right direction. Next slide, please. This chart compares January through April 2020 to January through April 2021 by mode. As you can see, the bus system is down 33%. Our paratransit's down 28%. Mobility management, our route deviation, is down 29%. Our mobility management was relatively flat. Light rail was down 44%. S-line is down 36%. Commuter rail is down 56.5%. Our van pool was down 44%. When we look at the system as a whole, we were down about 39.5%. Obviously, we have a long way to go to get back to pre-COVID level ridership. But as we look towards the future, our staff is dedicated to ridership recovery. We recently launched a ridership recovery team. They'll be looking at marketing campaigns and promotions to start rebuilding our ridership. Next slide, please. To leave this presentation on a positive note, April 2021, our ridership was encouraging, as Carlton alluded to. As you can see, ridership was down 59% in January, it's down 57% in February, down 28% in March, and was up 50% in April. I'm hopeful we'll see this trend continue well into the future. Next slide, please. So Chair Christensen kind of stole my thunder on this, but this is the last slide, and this is not a historical photo. This picture was taken on May 25th, 2021 at Orem and American Fork stations. All the young people in this photo were headed to Lagoon for the day. It was really encouraging for all of us here at UTA. We circulated these pictures, brought a smile to our face, but it was just really encouraging to see crowds like this on our platforms once again. And I think this is a sign of things to come. And so, as was mentioned earlier, I really think that in the coming months, we're going to see a significant increase in our ridership. Next slide, please. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
That is good to see those platforms full again.
It was great.
I'm sure the summer will have more of that. Any questions for Eddie?
No, I was just going to make a comment. When you increase the number in those on FrontRunner with those young people, not only the I guess the capacity where we fill up the train, but the volume, the noise level increases tenfold. A lot of chatter, but it's fun chatter. So anyway.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I think you will see some of our ridership campaigns and market development really target younger people or families as we go forward. You know, they are the riders of the next generation, or this generation actually. And so we'll continue to push in those areas as we try to figure out what the telecommuting market with the working community.
Sounds great. All right, we'll give some time to Green to talk to us about stimulus funding. That sounds
okay,
like
so
another
I'm
fun
going to
thing
have
to talk about.
Yeah, I'll have Bill Green talk about this from CFO.
Great, thank you. Thanks again, Chair Cronin, council members. Next slide, please. So let me provide you an update on the stimulus funds that have been appropriated to UTA over the last year or so. Let me orient you to this graphic first of all. All of the bars on the graphic basically depict the balance of the stimulus funds as we receive them over time. So the orange bars actually depict when the feds authorized the funds to UTA. So you can see back in April, the first act, the CARES Act, we received $187 million. And then subsequently, we began to draw it down. And you can see by December of 2020, we were down to about $90 million. And then Congress enacted the CRISA Act, which was the Coronavirus Aid Recovery and Economic Recovery Act. And we received $34 million in that act. So you can see a little bit of an uptick in our balance. And then we start drawing down again. Right on the heels of the CRISA, we received the American Rescue Plan. Another $168 million in April was allocated to UTA. And then we began a plan to draw them down. So you can see, I first must tell you that with the CRISA and ARPA funds, we are in the process of putting in a grant application, but we have been accruing eligible costs. So when I say the funds of CARES are exhausted on May 20th, you can see those will be exhausted, but we will start drawing down the ARPA and CRISA funds on an after-the-fact basis. They are eligible costs that we've been incurring. So much so that by August 2021, we will have exhausted the CRISA funding, and then you can see in relatively short order, by June of next year or thereabouts, we will exhaust all of the funds and expense the final $168 million. Now, having said that, there are different ways you can draw these funds down. You can use it for operating costs, and you can use it for preventive maintenance costs, and you can use it for administrative costs. There are incentives to draw these funds down quickly. There's a discretionary program in the ARPA Act for those programs or just transit agencies that have actually drawn down all of their CARES funding. You may have also heard of rumblings in Congress about using unspent stimulus funds from transit agents that have been allocated to transit agencies for new transit funds. So certainly there is an incentive to draw these down quickly and demonstrate the need. So these funds that we've received will be used to offset the $20 million or thereabouts of lower fare revenues that we've been experiencing. Eddie just showed you the ridership numbers for about 5 years we anticipate before we return to normal. And then we've been running, our expenses have been, our operating costs have been nearly double the cost per passenger as we keep the system running. So long term, these funds are going to allow UTA to plan for and ensure a financially sustainable future. Stimulus funds were intended to allow transits across the country to offer service and help stimulate the recovery by providing service to transit-dependent riders and communities and encourage new riders to use transit. The flexibility for the use of these funds is predicated on transit agencies retaining their staff to support the return to normal and the recovery. And so the 2020 CARES Act funding that you see over here on the far left, 187, was included in our assumption for the 2021 budget and 5-year operating and capital plans. So the plans that were adopted and that you saw last fall, it already assumed the CARES Act funding. So that would be about 202 remaining. That would leave about 202 million remaining of the ARPA and CRISA funds.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
What is the reasoning behind drawing down these funds by offsetting costs?
By offsetting costs, are you talking about the maintenance?
Well, you said it was offsetting the costs of...
Oh, no, I was saying, sorry if I wasn't clear. What I meant to say was that the funds were created to help offset the costs, and that we would use the costs to help us offset the costs. We lost about $20 million in fare revenue last year, and probably this year the same. And we're projecting that we would lose roughly $100 million over the 5-year period in lower fare revenue as we recover. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, to this point you have, yeah.
Okay, thank you. As we look forward and in our 2021 capital plan, we had assumed an assumption of about $103 million in new bonds. And during the last fall in our discussion with the rating agencies as part of our bond refunding, we were warned that bond sales could impact our bond rating. So preserving our bond rating is critical as we look forward to the next decade. So we could potentially use some of this money to offset that. We'll be developing the 5-year capital plan this summer with an eye to the future and with the consideration of these funds. The state's $300 million provided by the legislature We're dealing with rising inflation and we do focus on program delivery. So we'll be back to you in September to discuss how that all plays out in the context of the new 5-year capital and operating plans. Any questions?
So were you saying that as you're offsetting costs and looking towards capital projects, that these funds could possibly be used for open projects, or they'd be paying down things that we've lost on?
We could do both, actually. So as we accelerate spending on the stimulus funds, one of the strategies we've been using is to use the money on preventive maintenance, which is about $7 million a month. So the issue with using them for preventive maintenance is when we use that money for preventive maintenance, we're not freeing up UTA dollars, we're actually freeing up FTA federal dollars. So then we have to find a home for those federal dollars. And our quick analysis indicates that, you know, we could absorb in our current plan about $50 million over the next 2 years in federal funds, but we could potentially free up significantly more than that. So we're going to have to weigh all of these factors in the development of our plan. So it's not just a dollar for dollar that we free up in terms of local dollars. Not all of these dollars are totally flexible that we free up.
So not all of them are free because they have to go towards certain things, but if we were able to put these towards offsetting costs in certain funds, could those other funds be rolled over into open projects or?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. If I understand your question correctly, we took a look at the existing 5-year plan, and we took the projects that make up that 5-year plan. We looked and determined which ones would be eligible to absorb these and are eligible, for these Section 5307 formula funds from FTA, and those would be the first home for these dollars. There could be other net new projects that would be eligible, but that doesn't really help the financial situation if you're adding projects and funding at the same time. The best possible solution is to take existing projects and use those funds that we're freeing up on those projects, then you could free up money.
So primarily what we are doing is using eligible projects that can use these, that we were going to use local dollars, putting federal dollars on them, which frees up some local funds. And that's actually one of the ways we were able to avoid bonding for next year. And then I think we have a couple areas we're looking at: ridership development, potentially some capital development seed money to get some projects up and running so that we can leverage those, be able to be more competitive at the federal level and maybe at the state level by getting some work done on some of them. And then we're also looking at some workforce development activities we need to do, having some matches for some projects that we currently have to sort of scrounge about with the cities and that maybe we could have some funding available for matches for projects so that we're able to compete at once again in the programs that MAG or WFRC has, that the FTA has, or other areas. So we're trying to look at a way that we can take these funds and supplement, free up some local funds so that we can then able to leverage them for additional federal and state funds. I would say that's sort of what we're looking at, Bill, correct?
Yes. And one other thing to think about is that the financial plan that we adopted that supported the 21-25 5-year plan saw us basically dipping into our reserves probably out 5, 6, 7 years. So this will help us really stabilize the program as well.
Yep.
Sounds like you're being very strategic in using that money and we appreciate all your work.
Karen, I have one more question.
Okay.
Bill, if that money had not come in, what was our plan for stabilizing those funds?
Well, as I said, we had anticipated another bond sale of $103 million in 2022. And what that did basically was allow us to push us out about 6 years. Unfortunately, as we were going through the refunding last fall, the rating agencies warned us that if we were to issue another set of bonds, that would negatively impact our bond rating. And just off the horizon of the 5-year window in about 2030, 2031, we need to start replacing our light rail cars and our heavy rail cars. And that is a very large undertaking in the multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. We need to preserve and protect that bond rating and capacity for those projects. So if we had not been able to receive this funding, probably we would be in a very difficult position to preserve the fleet out in the future.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Julie, for your questions. Any other questions? All right, we will move forward to our audit committee report, and I have asked Councilmember Clint Smith if he will take the lead on giving a summary of the audit committee from our audit committee meeting back in April.
All right, thank you, Karen. I will be brief on the update from the audit committee. Again, we met back in April. Let me just get my correct notes pulled up here. So the audit committee met, sorry, can't get my notes pulled up here. Here we go. Back on April the 19th. We had a report from Mr. Ron Ellis during that time where he was able to report on the status of the 2021 internal audit plan, and then of course the progress on the findings from the past audits. It was reported by Mr. Ellis at that time that management is making good progress on remediation of the findings. And as with, really a lot of audits that have some findings that take some time to work on, some of the due dates for some of the findings to make sure that they're fully remediated will need to be extended to some degree to make sure that each of those tasks can be fully completed. Following, again, it was a brief update on the audit and the progress. And then following that, we received a presentation on the capital projects preliminary assessments. We had some of that today in our presentation as well. And then the audit committee ended with having a closed session for the purpose of discussing deployment of security personnel, devices, or systems as it pertained to obviously safety and security within the system, the transit system itself. And I do believe that Mr. Ellis is online as well, that if anyone has any questions, or if any of Carolyn or any of the trustees had anything else they wanted to add in terms of the update from the audit report. But again, I think those of us that were part of that audit committee meeting were happy to hear and comfortable to hear that we're continuing to make progress on resolutions of previous findings and finding better paths forward for us to protect the agency. So that's all I've got at this time, unless you have any questions for myself or anyone else that was part of that committee.
Thank you, Clint. Any questions or discussion? That audit committee provides a lot of helpful information, and I think that they've been working really hard over the past 6 months to clean up some of the findings, and have done a great job. So in our other business, we have some revised meeting dates. I just wanted to go over again. I think Jana has put these out to the council members, changing just for one day. I mean, going from September 15th to the 14th, and again, November 17th to the 16th. And I think the majority of council members have responded back and said that those days would work. I think there's one or two that had some conflict, but again, going with trying to keep the majority of the council members where they can attend the meetings September 14th and November 16th. You'll just note those on your calendar. Any input or feedback on changing those dates? All right, if not, we will go to agenda item number 12, which is to adjourn. Next meeting being held September 14th.
Motion to adjourn?
I think if all we need is a motion to adjourn, I'll make it.
All right, I think we got Clint Smith, and I think I heard Mayor Hale, give a second. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember Clint Smith with a second by Mayor Hale. All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion passes, and just want to end with a big thank you to everybody who has presented and engaged in the conversation and discussions. A lot of information that has come forth today, and one more goodbye to Carolyn and wishing you the best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see you. Bye-bye.